BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Okay, the first thing I would like to do is say a big thank you to everybody who checked out our recent uploads on the Zodiac Killer ciphers, as well as some of the other things that we did over the weekend, such as the ones on UFOs, the one on Briley Martin, as well as on L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. A lot of things came out over the weekend because we had that series with the Zodiac ciphers, as well as the additional uploads that we were planning on doing. So you guys left some amazing comments on that one. And the stuff about UFOs was a user-suggested topic. So if you have any suggestions for things that you would like covered on this channel, you can always drop them in the comments section below. And when it comes to our topic today, you'll see here that this is on the Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo, part of a multi-part series that we've been doing. But if you haven't heard the previous segments, that's fine. Please keep listening because this is the absolute best time to jump right into this series. Although I hope you'll go back and hear all of the segments. But the biggest thing to say is, this is the one where we're going to be comparing Joseph DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer, to many of the other criminals in America. Let's look at what are the similarities and what are the differences. The first thing I would like to say is, the news is still coming out about the Golden State Killer. I mean, I was just watching the evening news today, and they mentioned that 44 people gave victim impact statements in the courtroom. And in one of our previous segments here on this channel about the Golden State Killer, we said that there were going to be 87 victim impact statements, so I can only expect that more are going to be coming out. And when you hear some of them, such as a 15-year-old, or a woman is saying when she was 15, Joseph DeAngelo raped her and assaulted her, and she is still dealing with these effects even to this day, you really see that there is not an ounce of glorification that is placed on the serial killer at all. They're disgusting individuals, and they do very heinous and barbaric things. The reason why people want to learn more about serial killers is because, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Some people genuinely have morbid curiosity, and I don't even necessarily think that's a bad thing, because what we say on this channel is, if we're going to learn about humanity and have a greater understanding of humanity, then we have to learn about everything, not only the warm and fuzzy parts. And the other thing to say about it is, though, people also want to know, where are the problems? I mean, the only way we can find out how to improve society, how to improve quality of life for other people, how to improve quality of life for ourselves, is to find out, where are the problems? Like, how do these bad things originate? So, number one, you could stay away from them, but number two, how could society eliminate them? So I definitely think there is something very valuable in learning about true crime. It really isn't only about morbid curiosity. A lot of people will try to make you think that it is, but it is not. So when we're talking about Joseph DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer, a man who lost a reign of terror from 1974 to 1986 on the state of California, the first person that I was reminded of when I was hearing some of these things about Joseph DeAngelo was none other than Casey Anthony. And a lot of people would probably think that that is something rather bizarre, comparing the Golden State Killer who murdered over a dozen people, raped more than 50 people, to somebody such as Casey Anthony. But I think that there's something very telling about the nature of narcissistic and sociopathic behavior. When we were doing our series on Casey Anthony here on this channel, we mentioned one thing about how Casey Anthony once sat in a car with two other people, saying that she was waiting for somebody to come out of a building, and they sat in the car for an hour and a half. And it was one of Casey Anthony's many lies. We're talking about you know who Casey Anthony is, so we don't need to give her any introduction. But she's sitting in this car with people, and she's telling them that, oh yeah, I'm just waiting for this person to come out, and then we can leave, because of one of her own manipulative issues. She was a very manipulative individual, and that person didn't exist at all. And I was listening to a program about her, and they were saying, what kind of person sits in a car for 90 minutes, keeps other people waiting for 90 minutes, when they know the entire time that the person that they're quote-unquote waiting for is not real? Like, who is going to live out that lie, sitting in a car in Florida, nonetheless? And I'll tell you the kind of person that is going to live out that type of lie: Joseph DeAngelo. When you hear some of the descriptions of him, like the way that he would stalk his victims, he would select mostly one-story homes because they were easier to enter and easier to invade. And he would hide in a place perhaps under the bushes, or we should say in the bushes, maybe under the flower box. And he would wait for hours for somebody to be in a vulnerable place. And sometimes he would break into the house first, using all the knowledge he assembled working in the anti-burglary task force as a member of law enforcement himself. And he would rig certain things. Maybe he would rig the window so it couldn't open properly. Maybe he would have certain doors locked and such. They said that he would break in, rig the system so that the victim would have a more difficult time trying to escape him. But just the concept of waiting there for hours, like could you imagine just waiting in the bushes, just even for 2 hours? How would you feel? Bear in mind, we don't have anything like cell phones or Wi-Fi, not playing any games, just sitting there and waiting for somebody to come home so that a woman would be in a vulnerable place. And if there was a man there, how would he disable the man and render him useless so he could have access to the woman? And I really noticed that there's definitely seems to be a lot of behaviors going on that are rather consistent with a lot of other serial killers. Like when we talked about Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, that was one of the clearest examples of when we were discussing a case of serial killers that were killing outside of their own sexual orientation, getting rid of the men so that they would have access to the women. You will see this very clearly. On average, it still appears that serial killers tend to murder outside of their own sexual orientation. Perhaps we could say that about the Zodiac killer, although we don't necessarily know everything that's going on with the Zodiac. I mean, because of the identity is still a mystery. But even in the Son of Sam case, one of the things that they say is that, we're talking about David Berkowitz, that he murdered the victims in a sexual way. For that exact same reason, he was focused on the women. The men were treated as nothing more than an obstacle. It's a very particular pattern that we do see with serial killers. Now, is it 100% perfect science? No, absolutely not. I mean, you can find every sort of behavior under the sun, really. Any sort of behavior that's possible, you will find it at some point. And that's why I have a lot of trouble accepting that these things are like pure rules, because, I mean, there's so many exceptions to the rule, they really start to pile up. But I have noticed this similarity with Joseph DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer, and Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, the Zodiac, and David Berkowitz, sexually motivated crimes. And I say sexually motivated because Joseph DeAngelo definitely sexually assaulted his victims. The Zodiac Killer did not, though. However, where does all this come from? Well, some people really just believe that it is a culmination of the experiences in life, and it can happen because of certain traumatic events in their childhood that they did not process using the therapeutic methods. So then they want to recreate the cycle of destructive behaviors just to try and make it seem like this is something that is supposed to be normal. And with Joseph DeAngelo, very famously, he witnessed the rape and the sexual assaults of his sister when he was around 7 years old, and they were living in Germany, and this was on a military base at the time. But I mean, like, this is where people really become very divided, because a lot of people say that, okay, something like that is going to traumatize a child. Something like that is really just going to be absolutely shaping and modifying their ways of thinking and how they're supposed to behave in life, those particular events. And as we mentioned, the cycle of destructive behaviors. Well, other people are going to go at this in somewhat of a different way and go down the more Freudian pathway that's saying that events that happen to your siblings that were not from your parents are not exactly going to traumatize somebody in that way. Everything is going to come back to your parents. Overwhelmingly, mother and father, these are the people that are going to be creating the types of core principles that somebody is going to be using when they are trying to formulate their own moral compass, or in the case of a sociopathic serial killer, the lack thereof. But they're just saying everything comes back to the parents. And how would you interpret that event, though? If somebody witnesses the rape or sexual assault of their sister when they're a child by other men, perhaps the connection to the parents, and this is where things get really blurry in terms of how psychology functions, they could interpret that as, okay, my parents did not keep her safe, and this is the way that things have to be. You have to make other people feel unsafe because my parents did not make us feel safe, and this is how it recreates. But power is another thing that would really come into play, and especially if you get away from the Freudian psychology for a while and just talk about the nature of how these sociopathic and psychopathic serial killers function, what I can say is that there definitely seems to be this overwhelming lust for power. Like, one of the things I was talking about recently on the Instagram journal, hope you guys will check that out, BlackBoxNet88 on Instagram, is that there's that famous expression, money, sex, or power. Those are the three reasons why people commit crimes. I was mumbling on about it last year like a mantra, more or less. But the thing to say about it is that out of the three of those, which one is the most valuable, or which one is the person going to desire the most? Money, sex, or power? I mean, money? I don't think so. Sex? I don't think so. Power? Absolutely. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I mean, like, I think that power is the thing, the one of those three that people are going to be desiring the most. And when we talked about Dr. Julie Armstrong on this channel, a psychiatrist who made some comments about how serial killers function, she was laying it out as serial killers experience very bad things in their life. They had very traumatic experiences in their childhood, and they want to recreate these behaviors because they want someone to feel powerless because they felt powerless as a child. They want somebody to feel helpless because they felt helpless as a child. They want somebody to feel fear because they felt fear as a child. Now, I'm not 100% sure everything associated with Joseph DeAngelo and talking about how his neurochemistry would be functioning. Was he a born psychopath and this was just a matter of time? I mean, it's possible. Or was he a sociopath who has developed these behaviors over time? Psychopath meaning you're born with it, and sociopath meaning society or the social conditions are modifying your behavior in the way that it's sort of created by society and the social conditions. Now, when we were doing our upload on the neuroscience of serial killers, I was talking about how I had a conversation with a neuroscientist about how the brain of a serial killer functions. And when she brought up Charles Manson, of all people, and once again, it might seem quite odd comparing Charles Manson to Joseph DeAngelo, but the thing to say is she was putting forward, this neuroscientist named Christina that I was interviewing, when she said that Charles Manson was a born psychopath. His neurotransmitters were practically functioning backwards, and that is her prediction based on the interpretation of the evidence. And she's sort of just saying that he was a born psychopath who was born into some very dangerous conditions. And I could see that very easily about Joseph DeAngelo, as well as the concept of playing the parts. And we mentioned a few things about Dennis Rader, BTK, on this channel. And Dennis Rader was someone that used the term cubing. Like, we even mentioned some of these things in the Normal Lives of Serial Killers upload. But what he said was, it's like cubing. Like, when you go to church, you act like a churchgoer. When you go to work, you act like a worker. When you go to a restaurant, you act like a guest in a restaurant. When you're a serial killer, you act like a serial killer. It's just a different side of the cube. And then you're just seeing this side of the cube, and then you're seeing that side of the cube. With Joseph DeAngelo, I think that is 100% spot on. The problem with DeAngelo is he was known, though, to break out into fits of outrage and break out into certain types of outbursts. And he would kind of snap and show a different side of the cube, rather. But I think this cubing metaphor is something that is very telling. And with Joseph DeAngelo, he's even still doing that to this day. Perhaps you've seen him in the courtroom, and they showed some of the things from the previous proceedings where he was wearing just a face shield, like one of the plastic ones, and he's being wheeled in the wheelchair. In the recent news coverage that I was watching tonight, he was wearing a cloth mask, or we should say a face mask of some sort. I mean, don't necessarily know the material, but they're saying about Joseph DeAngelo, he is even putting on the front. He's doing that cubing thing to this day. He's getting wheeled in to court in the wheelchair, and then he goes back to his cell and he does push-ups. It's like he's still just putting on a front, and he's trying to deceive people, and he's living this fictitious lie. Now, there's something in the movie American Psycho talking about the serial killer Patrick Bateman, and I know that is fictional. It's a movie based on a book by Bret Easton Ellis, but there was a particular line in there, and maybe I'm gonna just try and paraphrase it, when he says, "But really, I'm not there." And I was about 22 when I saw that movie for the first time, and I was like, no, that is quite an odd thing to say. For years, what I really thought was that the serial killer, especially the psychopathic or the sociopathic serial killer, and perhaps other forms of narcissistic serial killers, would be more like, all right, they're completely aware of their destructive persona, but they are just using a facade, a type of mask to hide their destructive persona. But it always kind of puzzled me, but really, I'm not there. However, though, if we are going to look at what Dennis Rader talks about with the cubing metaphor, that you just show different sides of, you're just acting a different part at different times, then you can really see that perhaps there is something to that, but really, I'm not there. As we said, okay, you're going to work, you act like a worker, you're going out to behave like a serial killer, you're going to act like a serial killer. And that ties definitely into some of the methodical things that are associated with Joseph DeAngelo. I mean, as we said, the kind of person that's going to wait for 2 hours just to sneak into somebody's house or break into somebody's house and just get a little hiding space and then wait for the opportune moment to attack. Once again, it's like he's not really there. He's just playing different parts and following different types of urges. So we can definitely see that some of these things are present. Right now, I would also like to address a few of the conspiracy theories that are beginning to start about Joseph DeAngelo, and what they're trying to say is, I mean, you guys know that I listen to the Stones Unturned podcast very frequently. One of the claims made by the host of that one, Thomas Henry Horan, is that there's no way that Joseph DeAngelo acted alone. Perhaps that this was a large series of crimes that had been committed, and simply DeAngelo is just taking the fall for it. I mean, Paul Holes, one of the investigators in this, perhaps one of the most famous investigators in the Golden State Killer mystery, says very clearly everything to the contrary. He's saying they have physical evidence that could tie Joseph DeAngelo to all the crimes, and let alone DeAngelo's confession. So the evidence is piling up against that type of network of conspiracies that is going on. But what I would also say, though, is, I mean, if we're just not going to be like, who do we listen to? What I can say about that is, I was genuinely surprised about how expansive the reign of terror of Joseph DeAngelo was. And at first I was, because I was like, he really is the kind of person who's just operating in different areas. And people aren't even convinced that all of these things are connected. The East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker, and the Visalia Ransacker. They aren't even convinced that all of these crimes were committed by one person. But of course, he left a lot of DNA behind, because in 1974 to 1986, DNA was not something that he had anticipated for. But the big thing to say about that is, I mean, if there is evidence to support any type of terror network or any type of group associations that are going on with this particular mystery, all right, I'll accept it if it is presented. I mean, until then, I would really just have a lot of reservations about that. And maybe we can do a larger upload talking about just, did Joseph DeAngelo actually commit all of these crimes? But when you look at what he has been accused of, more than a dozen rapes, I believe, so did I say rapes? On about 13 murders, more than 50 rapes, and more than 120 burglaries. Over a 12-year period, absolutely more than enough time to do that, and to do that regularly without being caught. So that is a big thing. And another point is, if we're going to talk about comparisons and contrasting between other serial killers, we mentioned Dennis Rader, BTK, we mentioned the Zodiac Killer. They mailed in letters, they mailed in little ciphers and puzzles and such. Joseph DeAngelo, to the best of our knowledge, didn't appear to be doing things like that. He did not want this sort of fame and notoriety. In fact, I mean, if he could have done that so easily. Hey, this East Area Rapist guy. Hey, this original Night Stalker guy. Hey, that's me, and here's a little cryptogram or a puzzle or something for you to solve. But he wasn't doing that, to the best of our knowledge. I mean, unless somebody digs up some letter that someone had ignored from decades ago. But the whole point is, he's not bragging about it. It really appears that it's more about the actions rather than the press coverage. It really appears that it's more about, once again, recreating the cycle of destructive behaviors, as opposed to some of those other things that we mentioned about how somebody is just having this desire for notoriety, this desire for recognition. It really feels like with DeAngelo, he was recreating destructive behaviors associated with his own insecurities, as well as his own feelings of powerlessness when he was a child. And I think that there are some other serial killers out there that are going to be more like, I'm a superior human being. I am more powerful than other people. I am smarter than other people. I don't have to follow the laws of society because I'm a Machiavellian narcissist, and I can do whatever I want because I'm never going to get caught, and I'm even going to taunt you by writing letters about it. Some people are like that. I definitely think that Joseph DeAngelo got off more on the actions, solely based on my non-professional, unprofessional interpretation of the events. And the final thing that I would like to say about the Golden State Killer is that if it indeed does turn out that there were accomplices or that people are withholding knowledge, that is always the easiest way to examine this. That's always the easiest way to say that there was somebody who is an accessory to this that didn't get caught. If you want to talk about something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, someone wasn't coming forward with their information. But one thing we should always remember is, and we said this recently in one of our uploads on serial killers, that sometimes you're going to see that sign on a street corner that says don't walk. You look to your left, you look to your right, and you walk anyway because there's nobody around. And that was the example that we were given. I believe it was from James Fallon when you're talking about how you know it's illegal, you know you're breaking the law, but you wanted to do it anyway, and you knew you weren't going to get caught. The average person might do that with crossing the street and looking at some type of traffic light or street light, but with a serial killer, they're going to do that with murder. They are that indifferent to human life. All right, well, that's all for me now. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about Joseph DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer. If you have anything to say at all, please drop something in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. That's all for me. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so. But most importantly, leave some comments below, and I will see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.